as an example in terms of leadership, in terms of running a country. I'm not seeing this in the US as an example. Is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is not able to make decisions in times of crisis for the whole of the United Kingdom. The devolved countries, Wales and the Northern Ireland and Scotland, can make separate decisions in times of crisis. That, for me, leaves me speechless. A Prime Minister cannot just say, I'm ruling things now because this is my country.
It's got to have their own parliament, and Welsh, or their own assembly, rather, don't they? And so do the Welsh. Do they not?
But I think, this is a very shocking, pertinent example of style over substance. So Boris Johnson always modelled himself on Winston Churchill, with the illusion that coming with that is the gravitas and the depth and power of leadership that he wielded. But the fact is, style is not substance. Winston Churchill was an amazing leader in a crucial time, despite his style. He was a very unpleasant, disagreeable person. He just happened to be required at that time. And therefore, what Boris Johnson did is he used the halo effect. In other words, the positive memory of Winston Churchill being the greatest leader during the Second World War to get himself elected. But the fact is, nobody could stand him, which is why they got rid of him immediately after World War II finished.
The thing is, that's because they were going through a lot of financial, because the economy was down, a lot of people were suffering, and they felt they needed that change. And you needed someone like Winston Churchill, who ultimately was probably one of the best orators in the world. Short words, short sentences, and he was highly impactful. And the thing is, what a leader needs to be able to do is he's got to be a great communicator, because he's got to be able to articulate the message or articulate the vision of what he wants to do for a country in a way that's going to get people behind him. Get people to follow in that vision.
Beautifully put. And look at what Boris Johnson does. He stutters.
He hasn't. But Boris Johnson is charismatic. I mean, we haven't seen that so much of him recently. But the guy knows how to add humour. The guy's not a bad orator. He could be better. He is not a Winston Churchill in that respect. He may have the same waistline, but other than that, he's not bad.
And I suppose Winston Churchill didn't have to deal with constant interviews and media, did he? So we don't know how he would have come across then. But of course, the trouble is Boris Johnson has to put up with that right now. But the fact is, if you listen to him, the guy stutters. He doesn't say much very clearly at all.
Let me ask this one question, because we've seen a few riots, and we've seen some riots in the UK, and obviously in the forefront of my mind is the whole thing that's happening in America right now. Do we allow it to happen, or should they meet force with force? Should the government use force to control a rioting population who are taking advantage? Because the thing is, the message is gone. Because the thing is, people are using it to loot, to riot, to cause criminal damage. Should the police be able to use force with force? Because it's not the police over here who've actually killed George Floyd, because they're in the UK. So should we use force with force? And does someone like Boris Johnson stamp his authority as a leader by actually dispersing all this violence that actually happens? If it is to happen here on a larger scale, with that, because when it did stop over here, it was mainly when all these football hoodlums started coming out and fighting, and it actually demotivated people because they were getting away with it. Because as you were saying before, people will get away with what you let them get away with. As soon as there was another group of people who came out in protest of that, violent protest, it started to dissipate. Did it not?
I think we can go back to the arguments that you've had in the past and past podcasts with kids and structure and discipline. I think it doesn't change with adults. I think you can, when there's right and wrong, and there's a clear line when wrong is wrong. Wrong is looting. Wrong is throwing petrol bombs in the street, causing damage to society, causing damage to confidence, and not just a physical thing. So if it's wrong, and there should be force. But if you go back to the leadership of Mr. Boris Johnson, the thing that he is not doing, he's becoming so reactive at the moment, reacting to social media, reacting to people saying, for example, with the schools, oh my God, I don't want to send my kids to schools. Okay, fine, we'll do it in September. You win. right? But we need proper leadership, and if there are consequences, you follow it through. You can't listen to everybody all the time.
I mean, for
It's never gonna
example,
work.
I'd have more respect for him if he actually got a whole load of police out and actually actually used force to be able to actually control it and disperse it. Because this, I can't understand the whole Black Lives Matter thing, because it doesn't serve blacks at all.
You see,
And actually, only serves. And the thing is, Black Lives Matter was only about helping some black lives, not all black lives, not the black lives in the police, not the black lives who were on the right wing spectrum, not the other, not blacks in education.
see the thing. You mentioned the fact that Boris Johnson is a great speaker. Now, actually, he's a great speaker when there's very little comeback on him. So whilst he was a minister, he could pick topics to expound very charmingly and interestingly and clearly and passionately as Mayor of London, but without any comeback on him. In other words,
China.
there was no responsibility on him. He just could be relied on giving a very, very interesting, well-delivered talk. But and here's the thing, he's a charming psychopath. Psychopaths never take responsibility. So now he's Prime Minister and he's got to take responsibility. Guess what? He doesn't. And therefore, that's why, if you notice, and I've said this before, he's never given me the slightest impression that he actually believes anything that he says, even on the media, which is why he doesn't deliver it with any kind of credibility. He just stammers away and comes up with this nonsense of platitudes of, what is it, hands, face, space, and it just repeats it without any sense of understanding the problems that people are having around him.
He's looking to keep everybody happy. I heard this quote once years ago, and it was, "I don't know the secret of success, but I know the secret of failure is attempting to please everybody." And he is attempting to appease to everybody, as you do to be electable. However, I'm not sure dictatorship is still the answer. Because the thing is, it's failed in other countries, depending on, as I said, whether you are right wing or left wing. We've never seen it work.
But if we go back to the basics, at that level, I'm not talking council or regional, communal level, at that level, sorry to say, politicians are there for themselves. Boris Johnson is there, as Clinton was, as Trump is. They're there for their egos and for their own legacy. That's the only reason. He wants to see his fixed term through and say, look at me, I was Prime Minister, look at what I did. It's as simple as that. I don't think he gives a flying monkeys about what happens or doesn't happen, as long as he has something to show for at the end of his term. That's all.
And lifelong security as well.
Yeah.
And I think that is the bottom line, isn't it? So what we're concluding. Oh, by the way, one of my patients who's deeply into politics and has lots of fingers in quite a few pies, actually told me for the first time last week. He said, "I'm beginning to believe that democracy is not the answer anymore." Imagine that from someone who is committed, or should we say, used to be committed to our current state of politics and government.
But is another question that came up earlier, which I said when I said democracy is an illusion. So if democracy is an illusion and democracy isn't really there, then it's not going to be working because it's just a word that they've pasted in our minds that's what it is, but it's not.
As Mark Twain said, if the vote made any difference, we wouldn't be allowed to have it. And as I've said many times, democracy finished off the cradle of democracy, which is in ancient Greece.
In the last 30 years, has anyone ever asked the question, what is democracy?
And indeed, in the series Designated Survivor with Keith Sutherland, when he makes it to being president of the US,
you're going to use that?
Well, because it was very believable that as soon as he became president, he couldn't get anything pushed through because the slightest thing he wanted to do was immediately resisted by an infinite number of different lobby groups, and the same happens in the UK. And therefore, that's not the most effective way of leading by any means. The most effective way of leading is dictatorship. But of course, you then need to be very careful about the different types of dictatorship. So an individual as a dictator usually is quite destructive because you need a clear route of secession. And one of the more effective ways is a single-party dictatorship. That still doesn't guarantee competence. So therefore, you need to have someone who's groomed from an early age, and that comes back to, guess what? It comes back to kings and queens who are groomed from an early age. But then, of course, you've got to think about the problematic personalities, and then you need to think about competence.
Can I ask one quick question? Why is it that, in my opinion, that the current Conservative government led by Boris Johnson is acting like it's a minority government? They actually have a majority, but they're not leading and using that majority effectively at all.
Because the media are leading, that's why.
Yeah. Okay, guys, we're going to leave it there. We're going to another podcast we're looking to do. Actually, I think one of the things I'd like to discuss next week is actually working from home, because as we know, the landscape's actually changed. Is working from home going to benefit us, or is it going to actually hinder us, whether it's mentally, physically, even financially?
What an interesting subject.
All right. Okay, guys, thank you very much, and we'll leave it there. Have
Thanks
a good
for
time.
listening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.